Yeah, Coach Kia. What up? Talking about that good money. What we talking about? We talking about philanthropy. Coach Kia Croom playing A, B, and a C. It's no fantasy, she can make it reality. Best in the field like a first string athlete. Fundraising and marketing, she can tactical. Tackle your issues with a playbook so your cash can grow. She can show you just what to do. Coach Kia Croom, when she touch down, it's a W. Coach Kia, put me in the game. Coach Kia, put me in the game. Coach Kia, put me in the game. Coach, you an all-star, show me how the game go.
Hello out there. Welcome to another exciting and fun installment of Winning Wednesdays, the fundraising and marketing playbook. You already know what it is. I am so delighted to be with you today. Thank you for tuning in wherever you're tuning in from. It's always a pleasure to be in company with you. As you may know, or you may not know, I don't want to assume that everybody knows, but Winning Wednesdays is brought to you by Kia Croom Fundraising and Philanthropy, a Black woman-owned fundraising firm rooted in equity and inclusion, and my partner, Bonterra, a social good software company dedicated to powering those who power social impact with best-in-class case management, corporate social responsibility, and fundraising and engagement solutions. Y'all, that's a whole mouthful, isn't it? I just said a whole word, but that's what we do. And as I promised, when we embarked on this journey together, I would bring you the haps, the news, the studies, the tactics, all the tricks of the trade that you need to be effective within this fundraising and marketing space. That's what I strive to do and live to do for you. So without further ado, I want to get into today's episode. I'm joined by one of my esteemed Bonterra peeps, a colleague, bringing some news. This is hot off the presses. We've got some interesting data to share with you. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring him on, the man of the hour, Mr. Jack Murphy, Director of Community Impact at Bonterra. How you doing, Jack? Thanks for joining us.
What's up, Kia? I'm doing well. I'm still head bopping from that opener. That is a bop, as the kids say.
It's a bop, isn't it? Coach Kia, put me in the game, Coach Kia. Right. Show me how the game goes.
I appreciate being tagged in off the bench today, but I just thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, well, it's my pleasure to have you. So, Jack, you familiar with the fundraising and marketing playbook and what we do here. I'm getting ready to pass the mic to you. You are on the mic, Jack. What's the play?
The play today is nonprofit needs by the numbers. So it's a landscape study that we're very excited to be producing at Bonterra. It's out there for consumption. And just excited to get into it with you today. This is something that you are masterful at and have a great deal of lived experience and sort of bring this data to life. But we learned a lot, so I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. So the data points, because I took a look at the summary. A sister hadn't had the time over the last couple of weeks with all the eventful festivities. I'm a proud mother of a high school graduate. It's been a lot going on as we prepare to get this joker to college. But from my perusing, what I did find was some interesting data points that are consistent with what a lot of us fundraisers that work in this space know and have lived experiences with. Case in point, fundraising, right? I saw one of the key takeaways was, people have some concerns about raising money, which we know is really more a function of, fundraising, right? But fund development being the ability to build those relationships that lead to, year over year support, right? Whether it's from private, whether it's corporate, what have you. According to this study, and I don't know what segment of respondents said so, but they did indicate that a barrier to operational success was raising money or fund development. I'd love your reactions or thoughts about that.
Well, I hope all the nonprofit leaders that are listening or watching this are sitting down when they heard what you just said, because surely it was a shocking thing to hear that fundraising is a core need area. No, it's this study was meant to be bringing data to what we all know to be true, right?
Right.
For the participants, over 4,300 nonprofits, by the way, participated in this study. Took place from 2020 to 2022. We felt it important in the wake of the pandemic to learn more about this chronic need that we all know exists, which is holding our small to mid-sized nonprofits back, often those closest to our most vulnerable populations. So as you said, fundraising was identified as the sort of bottom of the need hierarchy for the majority of nonprofit participants. Not to say there aren't other great and chronic needs at the community level, but fundraising is sort of the undergirding for everything we do in philanthropy, is empowering and catalyzing generosity. And our small nonprofits struggle to evolve their techniques, especially in the wake of the pandemic, engage donors in meaningful ways, steward them, and who can blame them? It's really hard to do that when you're a small shop, perhaps a chief everything officer, doing all the things, sweeping the floors, engaging the board, delivering programs and services, meeting the urgent needs of the moment, and then being expected to build and deploy a fundraising strategy too. It's really hard. So this report was designed to bring that sort of that truth to life in the form of data.
No, and it absolutely did. Another couple of really, really interesting data points. And thanks for sharing that some 4,000 some odd folks in the sector that are actually entrenched in this work participated in this study. I thought that it was interesting, and not just because we work for Bonterra, right? I mean, just when I think about my 23-year career as a fundraiser, all of the organizations that I've come in contact with, the capacity building efforts, I've worked with small shops, and we know that I'm very strident about the fact that my lived experience as a fundraiser has been primarily fundraising for causes benefiting historically minoritized racial groups. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Black and brown people, right? And my observation has been, even in some of the moderately sized agencies, right? Growing, some say small, I say growing, right? In the growing, but even some of the moderately sized organizations, like tech capacity was not at the top of the list of areas that they had the resources to invest in. And it wasn't because they didn't necessarily value that or see it as important. One thing about Black and brown, BIPOC-led, BIPOC-serving organizations is we tend to be so proximate to the pain. We tend to be so lean in staffs that we're in this thing. We're in it. We're doing the work. We're getting people off the streets. We're getting people access to health care. We're fighting systems of oppression. And it's like, ooh, a CRM? About that. So I found it interesting that out of this 4,000 respondents, 40% acknowledged that they use fundraising technology, while 60% was like, okay, not so much. They're not actively using it. And I found myself wondering, was it an access issue? Was it affordability? Like, what is contributing to that? Any thoughts on that?
It's a really great prompt, Kia. And I do want to get to your point about what we learned about BIPOC-led organizations And again, bringing data to what we know to be true, the chronic underinvestment in their ability to capture pockets of wealth, to engage communities and fundraise in the way that they want to. Fundraising, consultation, workshops, curriculums, it's a very white dominant field. And often, Black and brown people, leaders of color, show up to these sessions or consulting engagements and can't reckon with what they're learning because it doesn't match what they want to do and what they know that their community will respond to, and in pursuit of community-centric fundraising, right? So right. I want to get back to that for sure. But you ask about the tech accessibility. So I have a lot of thoughts to this end, and this is one of the reasons why we built, Jumpstart, which is now powered by Bonterra. There are a lot of grant makers, foundations, corporate, private, community, family foundations who want to see their grantees become less grant reliant, right? That's something that keeps them more nimble, more diverse, more unrestricted in their revenue streams. And most every grant maker would jump at the chance to help them become, more invested from an individual giving perspective. But very few actually make targeted investments to catalyze that, at least in a way that's meaningful and sustainable. And I think technology is so critical to that. How can a nonprofit leader or an organization be expected to, build and sustain a broad base of community support, absence a back-end piece of infrastructure to manage all of that, right? And for many, technology is hard to, one, it's costly. Two, it's, can be difficult to do all the due diligence and source it for a leader that, as we discussed, is tremendously short on time. And then having the actual human strategic support to put it into motion is hard to come by as well. So that's kind of why we built Jumpstart, right? It's coaching, technology, technical assistance, an investment model that grant makers can bring to their grantees. But this data set, again, I think kind of brings that to life in a way that, we're working on, but also there are lots of other ways to help nonprofits with their fundraising capacity. And they sorely need it and are asking for it. Technology is a critical piece of that, but it's far from the only piece.
No, absolutely. You're right. And you said a couple of things that I want to respond to. Thank you for acknowledging that it's really not a one size fits all, right? Like in a perfect world, everybody could kind of, we could right size this and there would be equity and we'd have acceptance of systems and practices that would support the work that BIPOC or people of color led organizations, as I often refer to them as. You talked about a misalignment between the work that they're doing and, the systems. I feel like you were talking about the systems and, there's this misalignment or this chasm that exists, right? So thank you for acknowledging that, because as you know, I'm a champion of equity and a believer that we've got to find a way to give folks what they need, as opposed to just giving a prescription and expecting everybody to, fall in line, right? To just fall up. That's not the way it works. And also thank you for lifting the Jumpstart program. And the fact that Bonterra is working with grant makers all over the country in partnership to streamline these resources for nonprofits that are within their grantee pool, and coupling not just tech support, but also coaching. I coach as part of this program. I've had an incredible experience working with Black founders, particularly, Bonterra is aware that it's a tremendous value for me as a Black female fundraiser to help promote fundraising resilience. We don't say capacity. I don't, right, for a variety of reasons. We say fundraising resilience for organizations led by and serving people of color. And I count it a joy to partner with Bonterra to provide that brain trust and to provide tech support and resources to Black founders that are on the ground doing incredible work, that are unsung and moving outcomes in Black communities, improving quality of life for Black and brown people and communities. Thank you for lifting that up. I appreciate that. But I got a question for you. Because while things jumped out at me in reading through, the summary data, was there any particular data points that jumped out at you? Did you learn any things or like that? Well, dog, I didn't know that. Or was it more the same, right? More of what we hear, what we know. Was there anything that just struck you when you were reading the data points?
So I think for me, it was, in delving into the you said chasm. I love that word because it really is a chasm or a void of equity specifically in the fundraising space. Just the extent of it, we know it's true. We know that Black and Brown led organizations and the communities that they serve have been historically marginalized in all ways, but most especially within philanthropy, and again, fundraising being such a critical touchstone on the broader philanthropic sector. There have been a lot of great movements to evolve fundraising, specifically community-centric fundraising. I mentioned, but in looking at the data, it's still startling to see the breakdown of individual giving relative to annual operating budgets. So that's a data point that we lean on heavily with the Jumpstart program as a way to understand not just within Black and Brown communities, but the broader sector for small to mid-sized nonprofits. We found that on average, 7% of annual operating budgets are coming from individual donors for small nonprofits. We see that as a problem, right? Because we know that individual giving makes up, you may know more than me, 65 to 70%, I think is the figure.
It's in some cases, we know that Pareto principle holds true in a lot of the larger organizations that I've had the pleasure of working with. It was really that 20% of individual donors that were contributing 80% of the individual giving revenue, right? 80% of the organization's revenue, not even annual fund revenue, was coming from that 20% of major donors, right? So when you think about that, if the report yielded that some 7% of organizations felt, did I get that right? It was some 7% felt like they're thriving in that space, right? There's tremendous potential to grow. And I don't know that enough nonprofits that I encounter, again, because we talk about the lack of accessibility to, fundraising best practices. That is a huge problem because we know that in a lot of cases, when you have major donors, they didn't necessarily always start there. They might have started as regular donors or mid-level donors, and as their relationship or affinity developed with a given organization, they felt compelled or impelled to make larger investments. So for organizations that really want to tap into this and get this right, you can mature and grow your donor base, right? And even diversify your revenue, because let's be honest, Jack, what are a lot of organizations led by and serving people of color doing? They get into an orientation of, managing grants, right?
Yeah.
We know that grants can be incredibly restrictive when we're talking about public grants, when we're talking about the proportion of funds that are restricted versus unrestricted that can be purposed. I literally know organizations, Jack, that have money, but they're in a straitjacket in terms of how they can use those dollars. So if they were able to invest in maturing an individual giving program and growing that, they could get themselves out of that straitjacket and see a return there.
That's it. You nailed it, Kia. And even to dovetail off that, in freeing themselves from the straitjacket, they then have more self-determination, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what so many of our sector's grant makers, applaud is systems change, right? But we can't change the systems unless we enable nonprofits to become less grant reliant. Grants are an important part of the ecosystem, no doubt, but there's so much individual giving out there that's going to the large, established, multinational nonprofits. Not that they don't do great work, but so many of them would love to give to the Black and brown-led organizations doing great work in their communities, in their backyard. They just haven't had a chance to hear about them, right? And that's, you know, in our mind, it's partly because a great many of the organizations in this survey, as you mentioned, you know, about 60% are using, you know, spreadsheets, sticky notes, you know, PayPal, MailChimp, a litany of fragmented solutions to manage their donor stewardship. And that's a huge problem. And so that's where we feel it's incumbent on grant makers, if they truly are in the mind that they want to advocate and catalyze systems change, you know, investing in fundraising resilience, as you said. I love that. I'm all for changing the naming conventions. Investing in fundraising resilience is a very powerful lever to pull. And so, I think you nailed it across the board in terms of the straitjacket, the restrictive nature of grant making, and being beholden to applications and reporting, and, you know, individual giving being very, you know, opposite of that in the way of restrictions, and, you know, being able to animate them outside of, you know, fixed cycles and during periods of heightened need. There's just so much that is liberatory when you pursue individual donors.
It absolutely is. And I mean, like, literally, the larger, more well-resourced organizations that I've worked with, this was spot on, right? These larger organizations, I've seen it firsthand. The leadership was predominantly white. They boasted access to more tech resources. They boasted access to more high net worth individuals. They had higher visibility. Some of them weathered the storm of the pandemic, it would appear, almost effortlessly, right? Because they had a strong regional presence or a strong national presence. Their website was optimized. But if you were a growing organization that didn't necessarily have all of those things working and have a robust digital marketing program where you were able to drive conversions, right? Despite not being able to meet with donors in person, you're able to drive traffic to your website and convert folks. Yeah, they were faring. And yeah, that Pareto principle holds true. It's spot on. This isn't a myth. This is something that I actually witnessed with my own too. And the situation is starkly different when I think about, Jack, even some of the national Black-led nonprofits that I've worked with some incredible organizations, and they were still evidence of some of these disparities that this report sheds light on and reiterates, right? You know, so thank you for shepherding this. I'm going to raise a point here that's going to make some people on the line chuckle a little bit. Board members. One of the key takeaways from the report is the fact that respondents, some 54% of respondents said that when they asked their board to engage in fundraising, and I'm quoted by Tara, there was either a response of hesitancy, and some board members were even offended, right?
Defensive,
the very defensive posture. I misspoke.
Yep.
I love your reactions to that, because I know that there are folks on the line. I can't even tell you how many folks I've talked to in the course of the week. We're looking at, you know, doing some fundraising strategies. And I'm like, okay, what is your board's involvement? Or do you have a development committee? And they're like, what's that? Not because they don't know what it is, but they're like, it's not happening here. And I'm like, ooh, that's a problem. That's a hurdle for us, or a barrier, if you will. I'd love your reactions to that. 54% of respondents board members are not feeling it and
No.
not interested and downright defensive about participating in fundraising.
Well, I laugh because, of course, this is a report that I had a heavy hand in and I take a lot of pride in. But I also have been serving on boards of small nonprofits for 10 plus years, and this to be true, of course, with deep, intimate experience.
Yes.
It's a board is kind of like a chessboard, right? You've got your pieces, you've got some folks who don't want to move certain directions, but you've got some talents to animate, right? You've got some pieces in the back that you want to get out in front. But there's no silver bullet to it. And I think, again, this report shed a lot of light on where nonprofits are feeling confident in their board with their compliance duties, their governance and oversight duties, but where they fall short, which is universally fundraising. This report didn't reveal that to the sector. We all knew it to be true.
We know it.
And I don't want to keep getting back on this point, but I do think that, technology and good software can actually be a material driver of this, because we've actually seen it is, when you have a centralized source of truth for all of your data, your donor stewardship activities, your campaigning, your communications, it can actually be empowering for a board to, get involved even in limited ways, right? Having that visibility and getting people out of their silos, given access to a set of tools to manage their fundraising, it's actually can be a material driver of board engagement. Again, not the silver bullet. I'm not here claiming that software and donor management software is the silver bullet. That's not the truth. But I do think evolving fundraising, but bringing a new level of process and sophistication to a growing nonprofit, creating efficiencies so that they're saving time on manual inputting of donations and whatnot. Those things aren't sexy, but they are really important and powerful, right? And that can be very, it can help a board reckon with, the value of back-end infrastructure and what role they can play in helping nurture it.
No, I agree. And the reason that I kind of chuckled in sharing that, was the language, seeing it so plainly. I mean, I've been fundraising for 23 years. I felt that firsthand. I've talked to board members about fundraising, and it was met with both fear and resistance, right? I've also worked with boards that were phenomenal and up to the challenge. I mean, I train boards and activate boards around fundraising. So, I just want to share that in my lived experience, it's been both. I've had the pleasure of working with highly motivated and fundraising boards. I've had the experience of working with board members that wanted nothing to do with fundraising. Cultivate any way you slice it, right? And it was just like, okay, in my lived experience as a fundraiser, I'm like, okay, so how does that work, right? But the reality of it is this, like you said, building confidence, investing in those systems so that folks can not just better understand the business, but I would argue understand the impact the organization is achieving. One of the arguments that I felt was really, really valid when I encountered board members who were kind of, hesitant about being ambassadors for the organization was, well, I don't really know where we are. I don't know much about our impact or this and or that. And it points back to, systems. It points back to storytelling, right? Capturing story resource, like all of the things that in my work with Bonterra and Jumpstart that I'm able to do with nonprofit leaders, right? And in my case, I'm working particularly closely with nonprofit leaders of color or Black nonprofits, the Black-led nonprofits, Black change makers, resulting from the partnership with PepsiCo Doritos. That access can have impose a number of implications. A lack of access, right, to systems, right? Lack of access to training and knowledge, which we already talked about how that is a barrier to BIPOC led organizations. So I guess I said all of that to say I'm encouraged by the fact that Bonterra is looking at this thing holistically, right? We know that Bonterra is in the midst of this huge merger, right? When we think about systems like Every Action, which I've recommended to organizations to track their data and units of service. When we think about fundraising resilience or capacity, utilizing programs like Jumpstart and, plugging into Network for Good, for instance, or even, what am I missing here? Is it social solutions?
Social
I'm sorry.
solutions.
Social solutions being the platform for data and outcomes tracking. I misspoke when I said Every Action. It's social solutions. Am I correct in that?
Every Action as well. Yeah.
Every Action as well. Okay.
Yeah. It's a big family, right? We're all,
Huge
I would say we're still figuring it out in a lot of ways, but it's a tremendously exciting moment for us, Kia, because we feel like we can become a better partner to the sector by coming together, by building a stronger, more integrated, I like to say, continuum of impact. That's kind of a wordy way of saying, across the flow of money, of people, of vulnerable populations, the communities that we're serving. There's so many different silos and disparate ecosystems within philanthropy. And the sector is comprised of incredible leaders, Black and Brown leaders across the country, small nonprofit change makers that are making a big difference in their communities. They deserve better. They deserve more from the providers like Bonterra. And I think we have a vision that's very values aligned with what we hope to change in our country. And I think the Jumpstart program is very emblematic of that, if I could say so myself. Beyond just getting access to the systems, thanks to partners like you mentioned, PepsiCo and Doritos Solid Black, but community foundations, family foundations, private foundations across the country are investing in Jumpstart because it gives them that access to systems, and it gives them access to someone like Kia, who has been in their shoes, who knows what the heck they're talking about, and has deep, deep experience to bring, and a sounding board and a thought partner, and dare I say, therapist sometimes, maybe, Kia. And no, that's no replacement for real therapy.
No, you're right though. You're right. These sessions are cathartic. In some respects. I'm not gonna kid you, Jack. I sit on the Zoom, right? I've been on the opposite side of the computer and talked to Black founders, CEOs, and EDs that are participating in this program that were in tears. They were in tears because they're burned out. They're burned out, right? Or they're burning out, and they're so committed to the work. And they know that the need and the sheer volume for their services is so high, but they're under-resourced. They're having to, beg and do a song and dance, to get some philanthropies in their region or across the nation to open their purse strings and invest in their organizations, despite the fact that they're rocking it, right? Despite the fact that they're rocking it. Okay, so they contend with the fundraising disparity and just the ordinary stresses on top of just navigating in this space. I mean, you've seen the news, in the last 6 months, things that have happened. We saw what the SCOTUS came down with last week. As people of color in this space, it's like literally having marbles taken out of your bowl of marbles every day. Like, imagine if you've got a bowl of marbles that's filled to the brim and somebody's literally taking a marble or two. SCOTUS took about 50 marbles out of my bowl. Okay, let's be clear. Now, I don't even know if they just took a ginormous handful and just tossed them. So what I'm saying to you is this. My lived experience with Jumpstart and coaching is, yes, it is in some ways therapeutic and cathartic. And I'm glad that I'm able to get in that moment and listen. And then after listening, say, you know what? Let me affirm you. Let me assure you that the work that you're doing is so vital and so needed And it's okay to be burned out, feel burned out. Let's address that. What do we need to do to get your well-being functioning? Because if your well-being isn't at 100%, you can pour into this work, but where are you going to pour from? So no, I don't mean to digress, but I had to elaborate on that because it is very much a part of this work. We do get personal. I do with the organizations that I'm working with. I do.
Yeah.
I'm invested.
Yeah. Well, and that's the heart and soul of philanthropy. It is deeply personal, right? When we're walking around in the communities that we live in and we see something wrong and we're called to service or called to act because we feel like it shouldn't be that way. That's the very essence of philanthropy. And I think what you do and what our other coaches do for our nonprofit leaders is provide brilliant strategic counsel, brilliant, masterful techniques on, engaging donors and communities in different and new ways, right? That the development sector's changed drastically over the last 20 years, but especially in the last 3 years, right? And so, getting that perhaps for the first time, right? I don't think a great many leaders have had a chance to work with someone like Kia, right? And so I think it really is a call to action and that's getting back to this report, a call to action for the sector, for the grant making ecosystem, and all who care deeply about our nonprofit leaders who, as you said, are burned out, to think new and differently about resilience and capacity. I know we don't love that word, but it's still the
it's still the dominant. It's still the word that dominant philanthropy uses. So I get it. I just try to make sure that when I have an opportunity, I'm speaking to that, because to me, that capitalizes equity, right? I got one last question for you, Jack. So when you talk about the respondents, the survey sample, were these primarily Jumpstart respondents, or were these just respondents across the board in the sector?
So this assessment was deployed by over 120 grant makers from across the country over the last 2 years. So ranging, I think we had 43 states represented. So most of the country, most states had some representation, but it was launched as a precursor in each of those communities to a Jumpstart cohort. So of the 4,300 respondents, we enrolled about 400 Jumpstarters. So about 10% of those organizations were able to work with us. So there's more to be done, but we're very proud of what we accomplished with this report, and within our our Jumpstarters, we find that, for every dollar invested into the program, $5 new is created by the nonprofit, right, in the form of fundraising growth, net new revenue. So that kind of return is something we're very proud of, and it's hard work, but it's also a lot of hard work on the nonprofit. So we want to give the credit to our leaders who, we're just the conduits for their change making. But it's a blessing to be able to work, on behalf of our great grant making partners, as well as the nonprofits that we serve, and to work with good folks like you, Kia. I think our nonprofits are just tremendously, it's a joy to see them thrive, and to have someone like you in their fold to cheer them on, give them, brilliant strategic advice. It's game changing. That's what it is, and what we need to. Yeah.
It is, and I'm thrilled to be in partnership with Bonterra to provide that resource and support to organizations and leaders that are doing such life-changing work. So thank you. So what I'm going to do, Jack, is share the link to the report with our audience. Is there, before we get out of here, is there anything, what's next? Should we anticipate any more research? Is this an annual, or what's next for Nonprofit Needs by the Numbers?
I think we're digesting it, right? We're trying to better even understand what we could do more with this data set, because it is a rich data set. There's so much to be said about the chronic, underinvestment in the fundraising opportunity and capabilities of small nonprofits, and within that, Black and Brown-led organizations have it the worst. And I think any pursuit or any follow-on study within this data set needs to zero in on that even more. because for all that the racial reckoning did for money going to Black and brown led organizations, we see that cooling off, and that's not okay, right? We see that, and when it comes to investments in resilience and capacity and the ability to fundraise, those have never been very meaningful in our sector. Funding fundraising has never been cool, and so we feel that it's our mandate and our duty with this data set to make it not just cool, but something that every grant maker is thinking about, is how do we help our grantees, especially those led by people of color, to diversify their revenue, decrease their reliance on grants, create more self-determination and become, more nimble, such that they can create the change that we're also so desperate to see. So that's what we're looking forward to next, is continuing to explore and be a thought leader in the sector in this space.
No, I'm all about it. Well, I want to thank you, Jack, for taking time out of your day. Y'all don't know this, but I made Jack late. I hope I haven't jammed him up. My sister just couldn't get it together today, y'all. But
you always got it together, Kia.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. And good people out there, look for the data points. I want to know what you think about the study. Check it out. You can, find me on LinkedIn. Jack, you on LinkedIn?
Yes, ma'am.
Folks want to find you Find Jack on LinkedIn. If you have questions or if you're interested in learning more about Jumpstart, keep up with the news of Bonterra. It's something popping off at Bonterra every week. Bonterra is like, we're every action, where I'm like, oh, it's just so much excitement going on. So keep your eye on Bonterra. And of course, keep your eye on the Fundraising and Marketing Playbook, because we're going to continue to bring you the news, the haps, and some of the dopest people doing what we do in the sector. So until next week, y'all, peace out. And just like that, we are out of here.
Yeah, Coach Kia. What up? Talking about that good money. What we talking about? We talking about philanthropy. Coach Kia Croom playing A, B, and a C. It's no fantasy, she can make it reality. Best in the field like a first string athlete. Fundraising and marketing, she get tactical. Tackle your issues with a playbook so your cash can grow. She can show you just what to do. Coach Kia Croom, when she touch down, it's a W. Coach Kia, put me in the game. Coach Kia, put me in the game. Coach Kia, put me in the game. Coach, you an all-star, show me how to game.